An innovation so effective it became dangerous. At first, it felt like progress at its purest. Cleaner systems, faster responses, fewer mistakes. Everything worked exactly as engineers had hoped. Then something unexpected happened. The better the system became, the more fragile the environment around it grew. To understand why this innovation crossed from breakthrough to liability, we need to revisit a moment when automation promised relief. Relief from human error, from inconsistency, from unpredictability. The industry believed that removing friction would remove risk. This innovation was designed with that belief at its core. It optimized decision-making relentlessly. Sensors fed algorithms. Algorithms refined responses. Every action became faster, smoother, and more precise than any human could manage alone. The system didn't hesitate. It didn't doubt. It executed. Early results were spectacular. Incident rates dropped. Efficiency climbed. Drivers praised the ease. Engineers celebrated the data. The system reduced workload so effectively that people barely noticed how much responsibility had been lifted from them. That was the first warning. Because when effort disappears completely, awareness often follows. Drivers began trusting the system implicitly, not because they were careless, but because the system never failed them. It corrected small mistakes instantly. It absorbed indecision. It masked hesitation so smoothly that drivers stopped recognizing when they were drifting toward error. The innovation was doing its job too well. By eliminating friction, it also eliminated feedback. By smoothing consequences, it removed signals people relied on to stay engaged. The machine didn't just assist behavior, it replaced it. Engineers noticed subtle shifts in driver behavior. Reaction times lengthened. Situational awareness declined. People weren't reckless, but they were disengaged. The system's perfection created a quiet dependency no one had planned for. The danger wasn't malfunction. It was erosion. Erosion of skill, of attention, of shared responsibility between human and machine. The safer the system became, the less prepared people were when it reached its limits. And every system has limits. The innovation that once looked like salvation now carried a paradox no spreadsheet could resolve. It made normal driving safer, but edge cases more dangerous. When the system stepped back, humans were no longer fully there. The industry had built something extraordinary, and now it had to confront a hard truth. Making machines perfect can make people vulnerable, and that vulnerability was about to force a reckoning that would change how innovation itself was judged. The warning signs appeared gradually, buried inside otherwise positive data. Accidents didn't spike. Failures didn't dominate headlines. But when incidents did occur, they shared an unsettling pattern. Drivers were slow to react. Not confused, not panicked, simply late. The system handled so much so consistently that people stopped monitoring the edges. Their hands rested lighter. Their eyes lingered elsewhere. Trust had quietly turned into reliance. Engineers studied the logs carefully. The system behaved correctly. It issued alerts. It transitioned control exactly as designed. But the human response lagged. When the system reached a boundary it could not cross, the driver was no longer primed to step in. The innovation had narrowed the margin of human readiness. This wasn't negligence. It was conditioning. Humans adapt quickly to environments that feel safe. When danger disappears, vigilance fades. The system had optimized away the very discomfort that kept people alert. In doing so, it reshaped behavior without asking permission. Design teams attempted corrections. They added alerts, haptic feedback, visual cues. But these additions felt artificial. Interruptions rather than guidance. Drivers learned to ignore them, trusting the system to manage what truly mattered. The deeper problem remained. The system was binary. Either it worked flawlessly, or it handed control back abruptly. There was no gradual handoff, no shared tension, no continuous engagement. Responsibility switched on and off, instead of flowing smoothly between human and machine. That switch proved dangerous. In edge cases, rare, complex, ambiguous scenarios, the system disengaged exactly when human readiness was lowest. The innovation had made normal driving safer, but abnormal driving harder. Internal debates intensified. Some engineers argued the answer was more automation. Eliminate handoffs entirely. Others warned that full automation would introduce new failure modes just as opaque. The real issue, they argued, wasn't capability. It was relationship. The innovation had optimized performance, but neglected partnership. It treated humans as backup systems rather than participants. And backups, when never used, atrophy. Data confirmed the fear. Drivers exposed to the system for long periods showed measurable declines in situational awareness when it disengaged. Not permanently, but enough to matter when seconds counted. The innovation had crossed a line. It wasn't dangerous because it failed. It was dangerous because it succeeded without leaving room for humans to stay present. And once that realization set in, the industry faced a question far more complex than any technical challenge. How do you design safety without erasing responsibility? Because eliminating friction entirely doesn't just remove risk. It removes readiness. And that trade-off was no longer theoretical. It was now undeniable. The conflict reached its peak when engineers stopped debating capability and started examining behavior. The system could handle almost everything, until it couldn't. And in those moments, humans were no longer calibrated for intervention. That mismatch became the real danger. Researchers recreated edge cases repeatedly. Sudden construction zones, unpredictable human drivers, weather patterns that confused sensors just enough to force disengagement. Each time, the system exited correctly. And each time, drivers hesitated longer than expected, not because they were unskilled, because they were out of the loop. The innovation had removed continuous feedback. Driving had become supervision, not participation. And supervision, when uneventful, breeds attachment. The human mind drifted precisely because nothing demanded it stay sharp. Engineers realized they had optimized the wrong thing. They optimized error reduction, not engagement preservation. The system treated safety as an outcome to be maximized, not a relationship to be maintained. It reduced workload, but also reduced presence. And presence, not reaction speed, turned out to be the critical variable when boundaries were crossed. Attempts to fix the issue revealed the depth of the problem. More alerts increased annoyance, not readiness. Visual cues blended into background noise. Audible warnings startled instead of guided. The system still behaved like a switch, on or off, rather than a collaborator. The breakthrough came when teams reframed the goal. Instead of asking how long the system could operate alone, they asked how long it could operate while keeping the driver meaningfully involved. Engagement was redefined not as attention, but as tension, subtle resistance, continuous feedback, shared effort. Small changes followed. Steering inputs were no longer fully smoothed. Minor corrections were left for the driver to complete. The system guided rather than executed. Friction was reintroduced deliberately, not as punishment, but as communication. The effect was immediate. Drivers stayed present. Reaction times improved. Handoffs became smoother because they no longer felt abrupt. The system still handled the majority of complexity, but it never allowed humans to forget they were part of the process. The innovation became safer by becoming slightly less perfect. That was the paradox. Safety didn't come from eliminating friction. It came from shaping it. And that realization forced the industry to confront a final, uncomfortable truth. The most dangerous systems are not the ones that fail loudly. They are the ones that succeed so quietly they let us disappear from the loop. Because when humans are removed completely, even temporarily, bringing them back is the hardest problem of all. The resolution arrived not through more power, but through restraint. The industry accepted that absolute smoothness was not the goal. Partnership was. Systems were redesigned to keep humans present without overwhelming them. Assistance became guidance. Automation became collaboration. The car no longer tried to disappear. It stayed subtly involved, reminding drivers that responsibility was shared, not transferred. The shift changed everything. Accident severity continued to decline, but something else improved too. Driver confidence returned. Not blind trust, but active trust. People understood what the system could do, and what it expected from them. The relationship matured. Regulators adapted once again. New standards emphasize engagement continuity, not just failure avoidance. Metrics began tracking driver readiness, not only system uptime. Safety was redefined as a balance between support and participation. The innovation that once became dangerous found its place, not as a flawless guardian, but as a thoughtful partner. It taught the industry that eliminating human error entirely was never realistic and never desirable. Humans are not bugs to be removed. They are variables to be respected. Systems that forget this may perform brilliantly until the moment they need people most. Looking back, the lesson feels inevitable. The safest future isn't one where machines drive perfectly. It's one where machines help people drive better without letting them disappear. Because safety isn't just about avoiding failure. It's about staying present when it matters most. So what do you think? Should technology take over completely, or should it always leave room for us? Subscribe to join the journey. An